These are dark times. I don't need to tell you why. Yesterday I had a beautiful day. You know, it was warm. It was everything that I need. Bagel and cream cheese. Light on the trees and the foliage. You know, if I only had my own personal life to worry about right now, I wouldn't really have any big worries. But if I only had my personal life to think about, I would be abandoning my obligation to myself, my God, and our values. We are here because that's how we wish to live, to care about those beyond ourselves. To not do so is one of the only life choices that we heartily condemn, living only for the self. So I'm really grateful to be here with all of you in this green space, in our sanctuary. I reminded myself this morning, actually Francie helped to remind me that we do not want to get melodramatic, but I do think of that phrase, the gathering clouds. But this is life. That's life. Clouds are always gathering. Sometimes they just gather more densely over our own little world, and so we notice them more. Listen, I continue to be shocked by the thick, obscuring clouds of ignorance, by racism, misogyny, homophobia, xenophobia, and all those irrational hatreds that are based on fear and projection of one's own fear onto the other, who really isn't an other at all. I continue to be shocked by the really ridiculous conspiracy theories and the shameless generating of propaganda. There's a difference between spin, which we all know what spin is. We get a lot of spin and propaganda. I follow this really closely because I don't want to look away. Like, here's an example. Last night in Las Vegas, Donald Trump was rushed from the stage by the Secret Service, by security. This morning I wake up following places where his followers gather online, and I see that the narrative is that an assassination attempt was made on his life. Very dangerous, because what really happened is a guy who was holding a Republicans Against Trump sign was beaten, kicked, grabbed in the nads, and then detained for a search. There was no weapon, no gun, but someone in the crowd shouted, "Gun!" And then a bunch of other people took up the cry, and this is how fear spreads. There wasn't a gun, and there wasn't an assassination attempt. There is a difference between spin and incitement to violence. So this is what's unusual this time. Threats of violence and undermining our very republic. That is new at this level. So I'm naming the darkness around us right up front. I'm not burying it in metaphors to find later in the sermon. I'm just naming it right up front. But our country is in danger right now. We have a conflagration, potentially, waiting to happen, a greater one. Hey, it's not like we've been having a functioning government for some time here, for some time, but it might get much worse. If you were wondering why is the preacher talking politics? Because politics is religion. Policies made in Washington, D.C. giveth, and policies made in Washington, D.C. taketh away. They taketh away services that protect the vulnerable. Supreme Court justices protect families or illegitimize them. Hi, Iris. I love you. Laws. The policies mandate motherhood for every pregnant woman, sometimes, or allow women to make reproductive decisions on their own, safely and legally. Politics are religious. Do we welcome the stranger because we were once strangers? Or do we regard them with suspicion and hostility? No religion teaches that. Religious values are lived out in public policy. But you know what? Here's something else I want to really clearly name. We're already engaged in good work. We are as ready as anyone to be mobilized for the work of justice. We are already set up for crisis response. We are already in the business of directly confronting the ways that fear and suffering and alienation divide us. We are already set up to be lifelines for one another, and the lifeline can get longer. The dark around us come. Let us meet here together, members one of another, here in our holy room. Wendell Berry. Earlier this week, I drove to New Hampshire to attend a clergy conference at the Barbara Harris Conference Center. It's out in the woods. So my GPS got messed up, and I wound up coming late, coming after dark, arriving after dark, and I parked out in the parking lot, out among the trees, and I was walking up the path, kind of gravelly, couldn't really see where I was going, and the trees are there in the daytime, and I'm not scared about them. But there is something about the darkness, that vulnerability, and you find yourself feeling in front of you, to the sides of you, and behind you all at once. This little mobile unit of anxiety. I've lost the skills that people used to have, like most of us suburbanites or urbanites have lost them. In pre-industrial times, people were much more accustomed to functioning without light, as our reading just reminded us. And so humans were better at, for instance, seeing by moonlight. They were better at listening for the crunch of footsteps or an animal in the woods. They were better at smelling a slight shift in the air, the wind, a scent of something, maybe a scent of a rising storm or rain. People had very active nighttime lives. They had a lot more confidence moving about in the dark. But in our world, we have 24-hour light, and so the darkness has become an inconvenience, maybe. Oh, you grab your phone. Oh, where's the flashlight function? Or a sign that something's actually wrong. If you're driving home at night after work and you see your entire street dark, what do you immediately think? Power outage, blackout, a problem. It's a problem. It's a situation. You can't see, and if you're like me, you kind of get a welling up of primal fear. But modern industrialized society didn't entirely create the association of the darkness with fear, anxiety, something broken, an outage. Modern society just affirmed, through our reliance on electrical light, affirmed and amplified a very old trope, which starts in the Western cultural tradition that we know best, with the phrase, "And God said, let there be light." The primeval creation story, where God separates the darkness from the light, and this creates a metaphor that light is good and darkness is associated with chaos and oogie boogie stuff and evil eventually that never goes away, and that, by the way, has terrible implications for people born with black and brown skin. The central metaphor of Western culture can be expressed in the Gospel of John as the light shone in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it or did not overcome it. I am the light of the world, said Jesus. Or you may have learned as a child in Sunday school, Jesus wants me for a sunbeam. So this is deeply embedded in Christianity, which became a Western religion via the Roman Empire, who also had a central god that was the sun god, Mithras. And by the way, Jesus of Nazareth just happened to end up sharing a birthday with the god Mithras. Isn't that interesting? So this, again, has never not been central to the way that Western people think. Other religions and world philosophies also highlight the virtues and blessings of light, but not as exclusively as ours. And so there are times that this orientation feels kind of relentless and almost aggressive to me, and maybe to you. I feel some resentment about it from time to time, and lately I feel really resentful about it. I have a calendar in my bathroom of innocuous flower designs, and every month it has a little inspirational quote. This month's quote says, here's a little pretty, there's a pretty pink flower, and then it says, bloom on and on and on. And I picked up my Sharpie the other day and I wrote, or not, nothing in nature blooms all the time. I had read that somewhere and I was like, yeah, I don't have to bloom on and on and on. Nothing in nature does. Now, I don't want to romanticize darkness or the desolate feelings that come with darkness, but part of the spiritual injury that we commit without knowing it, in our culture that has no sense of the tragic, doesn't allow it, our culture that fears and avoids ambivalence, inaction, solitude, dormancy, any state of being during which the will and the ego are not exerted, is an unkindness to constantly affirm that our lives are only valuable when they are in the quest for the light, the improvement, knowledge, doing. There is a violence in that just surround yourself with light and all things will be better, all things will be fine. Something in us knows that light is not the only good power. It's not the only good power. We were created in the dark womb. So something in us knows that there are gifts in the dark times too. Things are happening there. I rely lately very much on music and poetry to sustain me. And I found these two snippets. There's so much that the poets have to say about the beauty and mystery of the darkness. I should actually post a bunch of them because I've been looking at them all week and they're gorgeous. But here's a little snippet from T.S. Eliot. I said to my soul, be still and let the dark come upon you, which shall be the darkness of God. And David White, a contemporary poet, time to go into the dark, where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. And I loved Karen's story because that's what she meant. She's with her little fluffy white dog in the darkness, and she knows she is not beyond love in that place. This is, by the way, the election sermon. It's a very old tradition. It was the sermon during which I was supposed to fill you with zeal for engagement in the democratic process, but I think you already have that. was like, what? They do. These are engaged people. I don't need to pump them up to vote. How many of you have already voted? Right? Okay, so, right? Talk about preaching to the choir. I mean, that's not what I felt you needed to hear. You know how important it is to engage, to make your voice heard, to stay in the conversation and to shift the conversation. I hope that many of you will gather around on Tuesday night here, starting 8:30 or 8:45, in the fellowship room and in the parish hall, to talk about not just what's happening, and we're going to bring computers and phones and watch, but to talk about what's next. Because there's always a what's next, no matter what happens. So we're going to talk about what's going on in local justice initiatives and creating community with each other. We're going to be in fellowship with whoever wants to show up. For right now, though, for this Sabbath day, we wait in the embracing darkness. For right now, as the leaves fall outside and the night falls on faster than it did yesterday, we rest in the embrace of the darkness. We rest for what is next, whatever it is. Whatever comes next will make its passionate demands of us and on us. So let us rest and breathe. And let the darkness work its comforting mystery upon us and within us. Jubilate, yes, rejoice.